water leaking is a problem.
What?
It's water leaking, yeah? It's a problem. Where are we off to?
This.
Yeah, we're off on a walk. Just us tonight. Little Jamesy, eldest and youngest.
Eldest and youngest.
We're off, we're giving the doggos a bit of a walk, and I'm going to go see if we can go down for a play at Kingfisher. Now, I can't promise anything. They used to let us go with the dogs there, but I'm not sure. So let's go and see. All right?
Mama.
Change of plan. There's like some really noisy event going on outside, so we're just gonna go like the other side where there's a big grass area where you probably would have seen if you watched our videos a long time ago, because we used to take the kids there all the time to just play or play football. So we're just gonna go there for a little bit. Today I shared a photo of Adam's first mum, his birth mum. It reminded me how truly complex adoption is and how much loss and love there is involved in our journey. It also made me reflect on the hard truths about adoption that don't always get talked about. I think something that is now spoken about a lot, like within like adoptive family communities, but probably not elsewhere, is that adoption begins with loss. I always worry that maybe I'm like romanticising adoption a little bit because I'm showing all the good parts, but the fact of the matter is that adoption, no matter what, it begins with loss in some form. And with Adam, that loss includes his birth mum, who passed away shortly after he was born. And that's a whole other layer of loss. There's loss being separated, obviously, from your biological parents, and there's the loss where he has no memory of his first mum. But despite not having memory of her, the impact of her absence is really clear. All we have of Adam's first mum is this one singular photo, which I'm so happy I managed to get my hands on back in 2017, and it's all we have. And when he sees it, I can see there's just such a mixture of emotions he's going through, like curiosity, but also like a real sadness. I'm thinking about printing it and having it somewhere that is always visible for him, so that I don't know. I don't suppose he can ever get used to those feelings, but it is something that comes up in conversation all the time with Adam. You might be surprised how often it actually comes up in conversation, and it is specifically his first birth mum, his biological mum, rather than the rest of the family. I think he's been able to make a lot more peace with the rest of the family, and as you would have seen in previous videos, we have tried to build a little bit of a connection there, where he will never have that with his first mum. And he is basically trying to grieve someone he never really met and has no memory of. And that is really complex for a little boy. And so then from that, so again, I'm not really, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're gonna knock my camera. And then so from that comes the trauma. So trauma can start as early as in the womb. And then you have to remember with Adam, he was a newborn baby that then was never carried or cared for or comforted by the woman who he grew in. And he might not have a memory of that, but his body does, and his body remembers that. And his body, because of that, there is trauma there because of that separation at such a young age. And realistically, it was the same situation for the other children as well, but they were even older, and George does have a memory of being separated. And early childhood trauma has proven to have so many effects on you, and those effects last your whole life. And don't get me wrong, I think adoption is beautiful, and I'm so happy it's part of my story, but I also simultaneously feel so sad that that is part of my children's story, and that they've all had to go through so much when they were just so little. And there are so many big feelings that adoptees feel, and possibly even more so when you take into consideration the different races involved in this adoption and the different cultures. So that adds whole other layers. And adopted children often feel lots of big feelings around identity, around their belonging. I'd say Adam in particular at this point carries two big identities. He's got his Ugandan identity and that he formed in the UK. And navigating both is definitely really tricky for him, and it's something that I expect will end up being a big thing for the other children if we eventually get to the UK. However, I don't think it will be quite so big of a deal, because obviously we'll be going all together, so we'd be going as a family with the rest of the Ugandan family. When it was just Adam, it's not lost on me that Adam was taken out of Uganda, and although like I made a big effort to try and put him in a diverse school and all things like this, my immediate family, his immediate family in the UK was all white British, and it definitely impacted him. I know how important it is for children to have a mirror and to have people around them that look like them, and for a time Adam didn't have that. Interestingly, he often calls himself British now, and if he's asked where he's from, he says the UK, and I just tell him I think he's got two countries and he's both things, and I don't want to isolate him from either or. However he feels he wants to, where he feels he belongs, I'm going to honour that, and I will. But obviously we're trying to celebrate both cultures and both things. But obviously also being a parent full stop is like, it's a big job, isn't it, guys? It's, these little beings relying on you, and who they grow up to be is so much on how you treat them and like the way you raise them. And again, whole other level to that when they are adopted children, and so much more to think about. And something we try and do is we strive to make our home and everything a safe space, and their lives with us a safe space to like express emotion. But quite often that emotion comes out in ways that, like it's not like a situation where a child is crying from the trauma they've experienced. It usually comes out in behaviour. And it's something I've really had to wrap my head around, because obviously as a parent, if your child starts exhibiting certain behaviours, you want to act accordingly, and obviously usually that would be if your child behaves badly, there is a consequence. But there is just so much more to it when it comes to adoption, and it's not that simple. And a lot of these behaviours they just can't help, they can't regulate themselves in the same way, all because of the early childhood trauma. All their big feelings come out in behaviour, and even they usually don't know what's bothering them, so it's not as if they can voice it to you. You have to parent adopted children differently to you would parent like regular biological children. And this is something for a little while I was struggling with in the UK. We had a time where things were really, really quite hard. And when I was out in public with Adam, I was really worried of how people would judge us if they saw us and what was going on, and think that everything was out of control. And I worried a lot. I also worried a lot because, put it like really bluntly, obviously I'm a white mum with a black child, and if I was like having to physically restrain him in public, I was worried how that might look to outsiders that might not realise, I'm his adoptive mother. That so like for a time I avoided taking Adam out entirely, and it's really, really sad, and that's just part of our story. And I really try to not document much of it online. I did occasionally here and there share snippets, but yeah, we went through a really, really tricky time. And during that time, I actually reached out to like my local authority and like the adoption team for help. I ended up doing training on trauma and parenting children who've experienced trauma, and speaking to like these specialists on the phone who were giving me advice all the time. And it was really, really tricky. And I know as parents, again, we all need help and advice from time to time, but I, at that point, needed specialist, expert help because things were tough. So adoption can sometimes be really, really hard, and I am trying very much to always be patient when the children have their big feelings, but obviously it can be quite hard, like right in that moment, to keep my patience too. I'm only human. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying my best. Fine, how are you? And then, and this is probably more relevant to other adoptions more than it is with mine, simply because how ours have come about, we didn't set out to adopt, we already met the children and loved the children. But there is a very real challenge quite often with bonding with your adoptive children. And actually that has been a little bit apparent in terms of James, because I spent less than a year with him before Adam and I moved to the UK. And then I was away for 3 years, so away from him between the ages of 2 and 5. And those are obviously critical years for a child. And for like attachments to form and all these sorts of things. And he didn't really know me. He obviously had the idea of me because people spoke about me, but he didn't really have many memory of me or anything like that. So with James, when we moved back out last December, it's very much like trying to build up that bond from scratch, and I have to be very intentional about doing so. It isn't as natural. The other kids, it's not the same with Tallie and George. Obviously I spent longer with them and they were older, and it took seconds to slot back in with them, like instantly, like nothing had ever changed. But so with Adam, George and Tallie, they'll instantly always be like running to me for hugs and things like that. James isn't quite there, and that's fine. I have to be a lot more intentional about asking him, do you want to come give me a hug? And yeah, obviously as I spend more time with him, we are getting closer, but it has been like building that bond from scratch, which is obviously what it's usually like for a lot of adoptive parents who get matched with a child who's a few years old already, and then meet that child and have to create the bond from scratch. So that is, yeah, I'm not saying the love's not there, but there's a bond needing to be formed. And the last thing I'm going to talk about, the last hard thing about adoption that's really affecting me every single day at the moment. You're right, Jamesies? And the last thing I'm going to talk about, which is something really hard about adoption that I have mentioned recently because it is really affecting our daily lives at the moment, is the academic struggles of adoptees, which tends to be across the board. All 4 of our children are significantly behind academically, and it's just not uncommon for that to be the case for adoptees. There are, of course, exceptions to the rule, but generally as a whole, if you look into like the percentages and statistics, adopted children and children that have been in the care system tend to be below their peers in terms of achievement and attainment and everything like that. So that early childhood trauma comes back into play, and like the instability of life, like it has a long-lasting effect on how children like receive and retain information, and their attention span and everything like that. Every single day I'm doing extra work with the children, but I find myself often getting so frustrated because they're just not making progress how I'm used to. Obviously I'm a qualified teacher that has worked with a lot of children, and my children are just not making progress in the same way that other children have in the past. And I tutor children that are struggling. I still do it every day now, 4 days a week. I'm tutoring children, and yeah, there's some significant differences. I'm getting hit by a dog's tail. Naturally as well, I really want my children to succeed. I want them to do really, really well. And so obviously I want any child I tutor or teach to do well, but there's that whole other huge emotional tie with your own children, which makes it really weigh heavily on me when I'm sat there trying to do work with them. And it's hard. I feel like in our situation, in reality, any extra work being done with them and all that effort to try and help them, it all comes down to me, and I feel very overwhelmed by it, and it's all a little bit too much, if I'm honest. But yeah, that is some of my true feelings on adoption and what can be quite tricky. But it is getting dark, so I think we are going to head home.
Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
You came along, couldn't look away. Somehow you turned my life completely upside down. And since you've been gone, there's no peace of mind.